I also wanted to show you the next two slides are, okay, what about the board chairs? What is their perception? The good news is that for board chairs, they selected the same type of role activities as the most important as the heads did. So we're in sync in that regard. The bad news is, as you notice, there is still some gaps. At the top of the list for board chairs, we have ensuring the school's mission is in sync with core values and market needs, ensuring the financial sustainability of the school, and again, adopting a following strategic plan, which is at the bottom of the slide. The largest gaps in this case were, once again, around being this community of ambassadors representing the school and the community as a large, assuring also the quality of schools' offerings. That was a larger gap identified by board chairs, and we didn't see the same large gap in the case of heads. And once again, also, there was a big gap in terms of adopting and following a strategic plan. For the next set of roles, once again, thinking strategically as a board and guiding and supporting the school head. These were the same items identified as the most important by the head, so again, we are in sync there. And you can see also the large gaps. In this case, in addition to having large gaps in fundraising, there were also large gaps in the monitoring school performance against strategic plan, and also the increase in the board diversity to represent the ethnic and racial composition of the student body. So in addition to asking what are the perceptions about the role of the board, we also ask what about the responsibilities of the heads. And in this case, we have a very long list of responsibilities, typical responsibilities for the heads, and we ask participants to choose the top 5. And in red, what you see are what heads said were the most important responsibilities, and in yellow, we have what the board chairs said. So once again, we see some disconnects. For the heads, the most important ones were, first, we have long range and strategic planning, followed by instilling climate and values consistent with the school mission, and then ensuring the school's financial well-being. For the board chair, the most important head responsibility was actually recruiting and hiring quality staff and faculty members. And this is the large yellow bar that you see. And after that, we have instilling climate values consistent with the school mission, and also ensuring the financial well-being of the school. So once again, it's important to be in sync of what we perceive as responsibilities for the head, also responsibilities for the board, because as I was mentioning earlier, in the new research that we're doing around boards, what we're seeing is that this is one of the causes why it might be one of the big causes of why we're seeing this higher number in turnovers of heads. And again, based on the research done by Board Source, boards who normally get this right tend to perform better.
I think you want to keep in mind 2 things. Number one, I'm a big fan of Jim Collins. Remember what Collins tells us. Collins says first who, then what. So the what may be in really good shape in terms of innovative curriculum or Montessori or IB or AP. But the who, Collins tells us, if you don't have the who, then it's going to be hard to implement and carry out on the what. Having said that, you go back to the slide that Debra pointed out, that NAS slide, board's responsibilities and heads' responsibilities. It's a sharp reminder that it is the head's responsibility to hire those faculty and to make sure that it's the best faculty and staff that one can put together. So this study is going to be interesting to see what's the root cause of all these turnovers. But again, the conversations, the frankness, the candor is important while everybody's understanding each and one another's role. Recruiting and hiring quality staff and faculty members is very concrete. There's a process. You can look at qualifications. You can look at previous experience. And one of the challenges with boards is that you come to us and we ask you to join us because you're very good at whatever it is you do outside your home, in your churches, synagogues, or businesses. And so you want to come as problem solvers and help us solve the problems. That's a very concrete problem, the recruiting and hiring of quality faculty and staff. Long-range and strategic planning. I mean, how many of you have been in the room at 9:30 at night doing strategic planning and had a headache, right, at the end of a long day? Instilling climate values consistent with the school mission. How non-specific can that be? You all, research tells us this, like specific tasks to engage in. Trower and Chait, we're going to talk about this a little bit later, say that the important tasks for you to help us at the school level with are those more ambiguous tasks. But it's so more inviting, welcoming, it's actually rewarding to be able to say, I know how to hire and fire staff, let me help you because I do it in my job. Or to take Jack Welch's comment, right? Jack Welch fans, the bottom 10% every year should just be lopped off. I had a board member say, why don't you do that, Jack? We're going to talk about concrete tasks and the abstract a little bit later, but I would suggest that the research would point us in that direction, particularly when you're a volunteer at the end of a long day, at the end of a long night, and someone wants to talk to you about what does it mean to be a global citizen? Really? At 9:30? You want to talk about that?
I love that, lopping off the bottom 10% of your staff. That would knock up your board quality time. Yes?
If you look at the one biggest discrepancy faculty members, if you go back to the percentage of how many parents, so you go back to the answer, that's the most important thing for them is the kid does well. And that's also the thing that the board has no involvement in hardly at all. So it has to be most important for the head and also most directly affects my life. So I think that's why
So,
Jack, go ahead.
well, so here's some of you may remember David Reisman, a well-known sociologist at Harvard, did research on behavior in colleges and universities, a lot of different research. Here's what Reisman said about boards. Ties in quite nicely with what you just said and Debra's comment about, your most important asset is running around the playground every day. Reisman said the responsibility of boards is to protect the future from the present. To protect the future from the present. So if you're sitting on that board and we as staff don't push you out 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years. I had a board member once say, Jack, don't bring me anything about what's going on in the day-to-day except the financials. Let's do bring me up to date in the financials. But everything on our agenda should be out 2 to 3 years. Bring us out 2 to 3 years because your job is to protect the future from the present. But it's so hard when you're a parent not to worry about the present. Do you know, Jack, what's going on in the second grade this week? I do, but why are you worried about it? Because I have a second grader, but you can't be worried about it as a trustee.
It reminds me of a meme I saw the other day that said, tradition is peer pressure from dead people.
And just to clarify, I mean, these were the ones that were at the top, but lower in the scale, there were things like counseling personnel, teaching, which we're seeing over the years that is less and less part of the role of the head, with this switch of becoming more and more of a CEO. But yeah, it was fascinating to see some of these disconnects in perceptions of what is important or what are the top responsibilities for the head. Finally, we also ask in the survey, what do you think are the top issues that your schools are facing? And in this case, we also saw some disconnects. In green, we have the answers by heads, and the yellows are by the board chairs. The good news is that for both groups, managing enrollment was at the top, the most important issue that the schools were facing. And this has not actually changed from the last time we did a survey like this in 6 years ago, I think was it. For the head also, the second one or others, this was also a long list of issues, and people were chosen up to the top 5. But for heads, the second one was recruiting, retraining, and compensating quality faculty. And we think that part of the reason behind that, and this is something that has moved up actually, is because we're seeing, the same way we're seeing that some baby boomers who used to be in headship are ready to retire. Something similar is happening with teachers. We are hearing on an anecdotal basis that schools are having a challenging time in bringing on board new teachers. Part of the reason also is because the number of people who are studying in that teaching career is also diminishing. So that might be one of the reasons why we have seen this item moving up in the list of priorities for the school. After that, we have keeping the school affordable. So also this is another item that has moved up in the list. And one of the biggest disconnects that we saw was at the bottom of the chart, where you can see that for most board chairs. This was actually one of the big items. When they say marketing and branding the school, essentially showing the value added of an independent education, that was one of the most important issues facing the individual schools. Another disconnect that I wanted to highlight was dealing with increased competition from other types of schools. That is something that was recognized by heads, but it was lower in the list, in the ranking given by board chairs. And when we are visiting individual schools, this is something that I was just commenting to Jack. When we started to see charter schools, and we were concerned about the emergence of charter schools, many people in our industry dismissed them because the assumption was that they are serving a different niche. We're not competing with them. But over the years, what we notice is that is exactly what is called a disruptive innovation. And now many of our members, maybe not in your individual cases, but at the national level, we have so many of our members who have never competed against a charter school who say that, yes, that's now the back of the door. We have a very strong charter school. And by the way, normally the way they describe themselves is an independent school for free. A new type of competition that we're seeing, and in this area there are so many different things going on that we're going to cover later with case studies. But even something that, things that were not considered at all by our schools, homeschooling. Homeschooling, and this is in part given the changes in technology that we're seeing. There is very little information at this point, but there is a group of parents, wealthy parents, very well-educated parents, who are being called the do-it-yourself. Because technology is giving them the tools to be more efficient about educating their children. So it was fascinating to see that among heads, that is an item that is at the top of their minds, but not so much for the board chair. And lastly, we also ask both groups, heads, SAIS schools is presented in green, and the purple one is NIS schools. But we ask heads of school, how effective is your board at focusing at the most pressing issues that your school is facing? The good news is that heads, in general, said that they were very effective, and actually the number for SAIS schools was higher than what we're seeing for the national numbers. We just have here a couple of final reflections. Based on all the different data that we have seen, the first one is discuss what diversity means for your school and what commitment to diversity, inclusion, and equity will look like for your board. Second, implement term limits to help ensure the board's composition and it reflects the current leadership needs. Invest on your board's culture. Establish an annual evaluation as an opportunity to reflect on accomplishments and align future goals. Formalize the responsibility for ongoing board development and board self-management. Identify your board's main responsibilities and assess how well you're performing them. And lastly, cultivate a constructive partnership between the head and the board.
I think what we have to do is think in some non-traditional ways. We have to think about that there may be people who aren't currently parents who could serve, who have other interests, other backgrounds, other experiences. Independent schools have been it's a love affair, right? I mean, you're paying these extraordinarily high tuitions when you could go, I'm going to just say this as a head of school and a board member, when you could go to probably some very fine public schools in the area for nothing in some of the more affluent areas in our country, but it's because of your love, your belief in the values and the system. So it calls upon us to go outside the normal circle and find people who do share those same kind of values. And what I would say about getting people from outside the school to participate, one has to wonder, how do colleges and universities find board members who are alums? All of our schools have alums. They don't have they don't have children. College kids don't like to be called children. They don't have sons and daughters at the school right now. If you look at the boarding schools in America, there are all sorts of issues about that, but just if you look at the boards at the boarding schools in America, most of those boards are made up of alums. They are not made up of parents who have children currently. So my question has always been, if colleges and universities can do it, find those people who love the school, who had a previous association with the school, and if the big boarding schools in America can do it, how come we can't do it? And I would suggest it's because we may be defining the work of the board differently. And again, depending on your arc, when you're starting and there's no one else around to do it, thank goodness for boards. But the work of a board must be, one would want it to be at that 30,000-foot level, which if we're doing our job as heads, shouldn't require you to do a whole lot of work. But I'm biased, and you'll see all of that next. Yeah, please.
I would add to that, so on the NEIS board, it used to just be heads of school.
Yeah.
And then we started adding in some association execs, like technology entrepreneurs. You know the little oxygen thing you put on your finger when you go to the hospital? The guy who created that was on the NEIS board for a while. He was also a trustee at Putney School up in Vermont. They bring a totally different conversation to the table, and they don't want to talk about, well, we only had this many click-throughs on the website. Particularly the entrepreneurs, right? They're like, literally like this. They're chewing on candy hard. They're mainlining caffeine because they're like, this is killing me. But when you start talking about the future of education and what is the workforce looking for in terms of skills and education, it is a different level of just interaction and dialogue, and you kind of have to bring your A game a little bit more. So I would suggest that will change the work of your board when you're not quite as in the weeds and in the day-to-day of the school. Doreen? Okay, and with that, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about board culture. Thank you.